Well, there's a lot of choices now, and so neurologists have to be open, I think, to getting training. And there's many drugs that don't combine well, and it's best to optimize one drug over another drug and not stick with polytherapy always. That's maybe a good lesson because polytherapy really multiplies side effects. And so many patients who aren't doing well on one drug can be converted to newer drugs. That's a good principle. But there's a lot of new things to learn about in terms of what are the options, what are their features and risks to avoid. Eventually, things will improve in terms of pregnancy outcome data coming out with the newer drugs. So there's really quite a bit to learn for neurologists in terms of not just sticking with the older drugs that sometimes are poorly tolerated compared to newer ones, but also, there are many patients now who are hanging in there with intermittent seizures who potentially could have their seizures completely controlled with therapies. Many patients find having seizures, particularly if they're uncontrolled, stigmatizes them because it limits their opportunities at work, sometimes socially, they're not able to drive often. So there's kind of a side effect of having seizures of stigma, just because you're in some ways not able to take opportunities to drive, to socialize in the same way. Sometimes patients with recurring seizures lose confidence or have mood problems. So all these things can kind of set people aside from what they potentially could do. I think very important for patients not to give up and to realize there's new treatments, there's potentially curative surgery, there's potentially curative or new therapies that can make them seizure free. So all those things that can be used to minimize side effects, get rid of the seizures, stop them completely, that can remove stigma because the epilepsy is controlled. And I think that should be the goal, no side effects, no seizures. That will reduce stigma. I mean, I had a patient who was having several seizures a month, couldn't farm. He would have his wife drive him to the restaurant to meet the buddies, and he would get in the driver's seat and pretend he had driven there. He's now seizure free for about 6 years on a new treatment. And, his confidence is he farms, he drives, he's teaching his kids to drive. So these things really help in terms of minimizing stigma, which is to control seizures and not to suffer side effects as you're doing it. But certainly some people do not have controlled seizures, and it's just a medical condition. It doesn't constitute who people are. And so it's just something to be dealt with and move on, try to be part of normal activities with some limitations, such as driving. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of breakthroughs are on the brink that are coming out, and will be some of these areas are great interest. One is gene therapy and getting to understand the large group of patients who have genetically linked epilepsies. That's a burgeoning field, and there's a number of small companies that are developing gene therapies that potentially can mitigate some of the effects of mutations and abnormal protein production, either with ASO therapy or direct CRISPR correction of mutations. So that's a very exciting area. There's also quite a bit just about newer drugs and subgroups that may benefit from them. There's many different kinds of epilepsy. I would think there's controversies too that get explored at the AES that are fun to interact with others, like what are optimal surgery techniques using, robot guided electrode mapping and laser therapy and new nerve stimulation techniques. And so those are areas that are of interest that will be explored at the AES, where there's a lot of sort of unsettled techniques in terms of optimizing treatment.